Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gamemakers. We're now in the last quarter of 2023, and so much has happened this year in the games industry. Given that, we have brought together a great group of people today to discuss some of the biggest trends that we've seen this year in 2023 and to discuss some early predictions for 2024. With us today, we have Matej Lancaric from 2.5 Gamers podcast, which is growing quite strongly. I know you've got a newsletter too, which is destroying it. But you're a mobile UA specialist. We have Lexi Sydow, who heads marketing, and I forgot your exact title, Lexi, but you're an awesome content person at Data.ai, and of course, everyone loves Data.ai. And Lewis Ward from IDC. Today's episode is sponsored by Data.ai. To access estimates for rankings, downloads, revenue, usage, or engagement for millions of apps on the App Store and Google Play, sign up for Data.ai. And speaking of Data.ai and IDC, I want to highlight that they have published with Lexi and Lewis a really great report relevant to the topics we're going to discuss today. They have published a Gaming Spotlight 2023 review report. Includes content about gaming trends, mobile games that define the first half of 2023, mobile game admon, and key themes for the year. I'll have a link to the show notes, but for anyone interested in some of the things that we're going to talk about, as well as those topics, I definitely recommend that you check it out. But let's go ahead and get this started. I think we're going to first talk about mobile trends. And I know, I feel like, Mate, I think you and I share a trend, I believe.
Yes,
so
that's very true.
maybe I could kick it off to you to start with one trend, and we'll kind of go around getting different trends from folks. But what is your key trend for 2023?
Yeah, I think we discussed it on multiple podcasts and also in LA in your
in our collab.
In the collab. So, but this is the thing. So I think what we saw, and I kind of call it like user acquisition, the new frontier of game development, which is like a fancy name for using fake ads as a part of the funnel, because there was this evolution of kind of using fake ads and then putting those into the screenshots, and then kind of people saw these creatives and then they saw the screenshots, so the expectations were kind of met. But obviously this is not as cool as if you take out all these like fake ads and then you implement this into the game. So the expectation flow is kind of like seeing the ad, then seeing the screenshot, then playing this fake game, and then you kind of like suddenly you are in a totally different game. So what happened and what we discussed was these two games within the same gaming studio, which is called Century Games, and they're doing an amazing job. So they developed the idle game called Frozen City. Amazing graphics, low poly, really good. In terms of the CPI, since I'm the UA guy, I can tell it was really good from the CPI standpoint. So what they did, actually, they took the whole idle game and they put it as an onboarding funnel for their Forex game. So you're playing the idle game, and then suddenly in level 7, you just zoom out of the idle game, and then suddenly you're in the Forex. So as everybody knows, maybe not everybody knows, but Forex games, strategy games, RPG games, they have very high CPIs. So how can you go about this? Well, you kind of implement this kind of very interesting, totally different game. You use it for UA to lower down the CPI, and then suddenly you have very wide funnel of really high amount of players that kind of stay in the game because, here's Forex game. Let's play this as well. And we saw it with Whiteout Survival. We saw it with Stormshot, which is a Forex game by Fun Plus, with Top War. They use
Doomsday.
They use merge mechanics in the tutorial. And then again Forex, and then we have Kingdom Guard, which uses tower defense kind of game in their tutorial on the onboarding funnel, and then again Forex game. So we would see this like kind of like a formula of using a low CPI kind of mechanics in the early onboarding funnel, and then suddenly we can see different types of games afterwards. So this is the very strong trend that we saw, and we kind of discussed like multiple times. We're just gonna go very strong in also in the next year, and I guess like that's gonna be kind of like a new way how to build games, I guess.
Yeah. Just to jump in here. I don't know how you first became aware of this, Mate, but I actually know people at Sentry, so I can't confirm or deny, but I'll just say I definitely agree with that trend, and I've been seeing it more and more too. Yeah, it's just clever. It's like the marketers realize that you can get much lower cost of user acquisition on the ad side, so why not just move that downstream directly into the game? And maybe as I don't know if Lewis or Lexi, feel free to just kind of jump in with thoughts on this as well. But I think
Or disagree.
or disagree, yeah. But I think the other thing that this kind of this trend indicates to me is almost like kind of a sub trend of this, which is I think that the ramifications of this is that there is a shift. I mean, if you look back at the history of the mobile gaming market, there's been times in which like distribution during the early Tapjoy days was like most critical, where game quality became more critical. And now I think we're moving back where, and especially with whatever's going to happen next year, which we can talk about during predictions, but where there is now like this shift towards there was a period of time when it was really important to be great at not just game quality, but live operations, infrastructure capabilities, and growth. And I do think that for companies to be successful in the future, and what we're starting to see with these kinds of tactics is for product and growth to be more tied and to be, to be working together more closely.
I mean, my gut reaction is it sounds somewhat deceptive the way you described it. In other words, you're starting off with like a match 3 game, and then suddenly you find yourself in something much more, hardcore leaning or whatever it is, and the gameplay mechanics change. I mean, that handoff has to be super smooth, and I presume, I have no idea whether the attrition rates, like the folks that churn away once you hit that magic level of, here's your introduction to the kiddie pool, and then you go to the main game and it turns out you're doing something much more sophisticated. And it is I could imagine it working for the level of the game dev or publisher, but I would expect, unless there's a really smooth way of doing it, that would be very hard on the gamers who feel that their expectations has been broken. But I just don't know it. Like, I'll take your word for it that it's happening. I haven't played those games you mentioned.
So there's the evolution. So the Frozen City to Whiteout Survival, that's very smooth. You won't even realize like suddenly you're on a 4X map. That's super smooth, and that's why I think like the game is making so much money and it's really good. There's like the evolution of Hero Wars, which they just duct tape these fake ads into the gameplay just to get this like kind of like illusion. And there are these Reddit threads where players are asking like, hey, so I played this puzzle game in Hero Wars. Where is it coming again? Because I'm on level 300 and it's not there. And I'm kind of playing to get to the next level of the puzzle. So it's like, this is kind of happening. Nobody told this person it's not in the game, unfortunately, anymore.
Well, if they're getting the money, I guess the game dev pub wouldn't really care. Yeah. But it does seem like, I've heard of playable ads where you want to do something very basic, make it seem, that it's going to appeal to a lot of people. But it sounds like you're getting them onboarded through that mechanic. And then you're kind of spoon feeding them to the point that they have to learn these more sophisticated mechanics, whether they wanted to or not, to keep playing. So interesting idea, though. Cool. I like that trend.
I wonder, I'm curious, are there any sort of gameplay mechanics or subgenres that wouldn't work, right? Like, I do think there's that world where if you go in and it is more core leaning and then it goes to like a little bit more intense gameplay, like that makes a lot of sense to me. But if you're playing like a match game and then you graduate to something way more intense, like that, does that work?
So there's the game.
I feel like those are different personas and players.
Very different personas of players, but then there's Evony, which is a strategy game, and they kind of implemented the pull the pin kind of like puzzle mechanic, but that's kind of like very hard. And if you think about it, match-free games, they have a lot of male hardcore players as well, and they are quite like in Candy Crush, like level 1,500. So on the surface, it's kind of, yes, it's different type of persona, but then if you think about it, then it's very close.
Yeah, maybe just a shout out to Data.ai, but there was a period of time when a number of folks from the product side of mobile games business were looking a lot at like I forgot what it's called, the cross affinity data, like the players
Yeah.
of this game kind of played this different genre and things like that. But if this trend continues, I do see that an implication would be probably a lot more folks looking at that data. If we're gonna, we had the fake ads trend, and now it's shifting
Yeah.
to the let's just call it fake game trend. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna do this fake
Gameplay.
game thing, then so Lexi, I think you are bringing up a good question. If you're gonna do that, having an understanding of that cross affinity data probably could
No,
be helpful.
that's super important. Yeah, that's super important. It was available in Facebook audiences, which now it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's too
So
bad.
yeah,
I used to look at that all the time.
Well, too bad, but then it's too good for Data.ai on the other hand, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It is interesting because there is that sort of, it's not always obvious. There's like something,
Right.
there's something in the more
Yes.
the mentality of the player for why these, people who play certain games are kind of overlapping with others. So it is interesting. I wonder from the user experience, though, how I'd feel if I was forever chasing the part I liked. But it's a level, I mean, that's interesting that people are sticking around. Like
Yeah.
they're still trying to get to that thing that got them in. And then they're like, is it going to come? Where is it?
Yeah, that illusion is perfect in that case.
You constantly keep playing,
Yeah.
trying to get to where you were when you started.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can wrap for trend one. Trend one, fake games, and for trend two, Lewis, what do you think? What's a trend from you?
Oh, well, yeah. So one of them that I'm just been personally interested in this year is kind of the ongoing rise of live service games. So I know they're hard to define, and I guess I'm asking this group if there is a kind of core mechanic, obviously, or something built into the game that sets live service games apart from other games, but at a high level, whether it's multi-platform or constant, updates and releases. Is it focus on live multiplayer? Is it a persistent world that evolves over time? Like what are the elements, if you think about the most popular live service games, Fortnite being a prototypical example, that they have in common versus other games? And I find it difficult to separate those things out. But in terms of, just stuff that happened this year, Sony's acquisition of Bungie for, what is it, $2.4 billion, something like that, I think, is kind of a somewhat of a sea change from Sony's perspective. They want to have like 10 live service games by early 2026, I believe it is, up from 0 3 years ago. And they say that something like over half of their R&D next year will be devoted to developing live service games. That's in addition to potential acquisitions, right? So to me, Sony put its foot on the gas of live service games this year. And then I would say the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard would be another example of them getting at least, Call of Duty, Warzone 2, and some other, assets that are live service games. And so you could possibly say that, hey, Microsoft is also doubling down or trying to grow its footprint in the live service game market as well. So I don't know. I would say that is a trend that I've become more aware of this year. Obviously, that term's been around since before the pandemic, but it seems like at least Microsoft and Sony on the console side have kind of figured it out and they're doubling down on it this year. And so I'd like, just my sense is that it's growing. But if there are countervailing views that, one, it's too difficult to define, or two, there's too much investment going in there now, and unless you're a huge market player, you simply can't succeed there, and therefore your recommendation is not for smaller teams to get into it or whatever it is. I just like to hear definitionally how you look at it, and B, do you think it will keep growing, or is there something tempering how much market focus we should have, rather than just having it be a buzzword, which is hard to define.
Well, it's great that you said the console games, because I think like this is happening on mobile for a long time. I mean, if you look at the Royal Match, Candy Crush, and other games, the live ops and the new content and everything, like that's happening for a long time. Like thanks to that, like they are growing like crazy still.
Yeah. And I would say, Lewis, to your point, I think that maybe one of the things that you're discussing where and what we're seeing is that more of these kinds of games that are, termed forever franchises by Zynga, but these games that don't just last, a couple of years, but
Right.
can go on for 10, 15 plus years. And the implication of which is that players, if you are able to appropriately live operate your game, that that because of the durability of these games, that like, my kids play the same game every weekend, and I think they're going to be playing the same game, play Valorant for a long time,
Oh,
right? And
nice.
so the implication of this is like, then what does that mean for new games trying to enter the market? You've got to displace one of these long-term durable games, and so. And it kind of speaks to the previous point I made. The kind of sub trend on the fake games is like, having a shift in terms of orientation of your development, not just to the game quality, but game quality and live operations or live services, understanding how to do that well as growth. But I don't know. I guess my point here is just I kind of agree with you, Lewis, that this is becoming increasingly important. That I think there's always going to be a space for your kind of like narrative based action, like your God of War, your Spider-Man, those kind of games.
Mhm.
But also there's gonna be this increasing focus on how do you then displace a long-term durable game that's just really locked players in, the kind of players like Mate said that have been playing these puzzle games for forever, or who are playing League of Legends or Wild Rift or Fortnite or whatever for such a long time.
Well, I'm still playing Clash of Clans, so I guess
Yeah, same here.
Nice.
I mean, I think what you
But
said,
you have
Mate,
to
was really
disagree, Lexi,
important.
by design. You have to disagree with us, Lexi.
I know. I feel, gosh. But I
Yeah, no,
mean, for me, I do think I struggled with thinking about like, can you put these in a category? It's more, obviously I think more like a Venn diagram. Like so many games are going to like fall into this and other types of genres. It's more of a tag, if anything. But I think what you said, Mate, about like mobile games have been doing this a while. And that's where my first thought was like, we've had such good examples of games and like even recent ones like Genshin Impact and like Honkai Star Rail. Like these are games that, have made a huge splash in recent time and are doing it really well. And I guess one of the things that I kind of think about is, especially with mobile and like the audience it commands, is, this kind of feels like it's becoming, in a lot of ways, very table stakes. And then in some instances, I think, is there a case that like gamers on the whole are sort of like evolving and their expectations are getting bigger, and like you kind of need to have these new, content or features or events that are evolving because just everyone's playing games and like our collective like even with, and it goes I think back to these like fake ads or fake games. It's like, okay, so maybe if you get kind of hoodwinked in and you're playing a game and then all of a sudden it's kind of a switch, but you've been exposed to so much more of different core gameplay mechanics in other games that like maybe it's not that big of a switch for you because mobile has kind of made it super easy and a lot of people have gotten into these spaces that traditionally you wouldn't have thought you would play that type of game. Maybe like have we collected, it has like the tides risen overall and people are expecting a lot more and we're all kind of like more intense, I don't know, for lack of a better word, gamers on the whole.
Definitely yes, but also like what you just said, it kind of directly impacts UA. So you want to have live op systems, you want to have new content because that helps UA, that helps scale, and that's how it should be, right?
Yeah, maybe one follow up on your comments, Lexi, is like I do agree with you that like the quality bar or the expertise that will be required to appropriately deliver a great live operating experience, right? And what does that mean to the design of the game as well, right? In terms of granularity, in terms of how you make a game extremely replayable, how you have to then think about, do we change the meta or do we change specific features in the game so that it can continue to gain interest in the game over long periods of time. But Yeah, I definitely think that this is so to your point, Lewis, I agree that this is something that's kind of happening in which game development studios are going to have to adjust to be able to deliver a great customer experience that then can lock these players in. And the implications to the game industry could likely be somewhat profound in terms of like, what kind of expertise is required and what kind of capabilities are required, and also the ability to introduce the number of new games or the kinds of games into a space, and the need for games to actually be more differentiated. Because if one game has really locked in certain kinds of players, like we can't be subtly different anymore potentially. So yeah, I do think that this trend has a lot of implications that we'll have to figure out, and we'll see how that unfolds over the next few years.
Also, for anyone who is actually listening, like you mentioned, Genshin Impact and Honkai, don't get inspired by them, because you would need like 4,000 employees to actually
Yeah.
put the
It's a
whole
low bar.
life of the content out. So try to get the different gaming company as an inspiration.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the things that they share in common is they tend to come from very large companies, and there are some examples of smaller studios that haven't succeeded with live service games. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe part of it.
Yeah. All right. Lexi, do you have a trend?
Yes, I do. So this, you mentioned the report that we did with Lewis at IDC before, and I think this was a really interesting one that's continuing right now and is super topical and seasonal. But we've seen in terms of sort of the mobile games that have been doing very well this year, because people, especially coming off the back of last year, where gaming had a bit of a dip in spend for mobile. A lot of people have asked us, what's working in 2023 then, like who is succeeding then in this climate. And I will, I wrote the name down so I don't get it wrong. It used to be FIFA. Now EA Sports FC Mobile 24 Soccer. That game in particular had a really good year. And I think there is a fusion of a trend where I see the companion gaming, live sports, live events demand being a really interesting intersection. So post-pandemic, we've seen still really strong interest in live sporting events. Just recently in Q3, we've seen football, both American and like English, so soccer, have done very well in terms of streaming and also interesting games. So during the World Cup, we saw a huge surge of downloads for, at the time, FIFA, for EA's soccer game, about 135%. We've seen they hit $1 billion in spend just after this time. The Women's World Cup had the biggest viewership in terms of any Women's World Cup yet, and attendance. I was lucky I got to go to some games since it was in Australia, which was awesome.
Nice.
And then part of the new rollout for FIFA's, I'll always say FIFA, EA's
It's going to be
24.
FIFA forever. It's going to be FIFA forever
it's
anyway.
Really hard. I have questions for you on this. I have questions about UA here. It's coming. But they've released their first, they've got female players, so you can have a unit, like I think they call it a universal team, where you can have like female and male athletes kind of combine and create that big team. So that's one big area, I think. And to kind of continue on it, in Q3, we saw the EA Sports FC 24 companion app, where you have to have, an EA, a PS, or an Xbox account. And you're sort of having your ultimate team that you're working towards. That has surged in spend in a lot of markets. And then this was an interesting UA tactic. We saw Soccer Manager 2024 Football by Invincible Studio out of the UK timed their release for the same day as EA dropped the new team. So
Nice.
they saw a huge surge, super savvy in organic interest. So they had this massive growth across downloads, and especially in like big soccer countries, Brazil, Mexico, Germany, Spain, UK, Italy. And there's no need to have an account. It's just, you just go in and you can kind of play a similar thing. So this is a trend that I think I'm particularly interested in. I also really like soccer, so I'm a little biased.
Nice.
But I think that's interesting to me. And I think one of the questions I have is around with the no longer being FIFA, what happens with UA? Does it affect it? Does it hurt, re-engagement? Or, do they have such a sizable base of enthusiasts and people know that it's not going to be a big deal for them going forward?
Yeah, if this was any other gaming studio, I would say the branding and the IP would have very big effect on on the UA costs. But since it's EA and they don't do shit on the UA, so I'm not super sure about that. And also, as you said and as I said, it's FIFA. It's going to be FIFA all the time, so nobody cares. There's Pro Evolution Soccer and FIFA, nothing else. And PS is also or always was the game number 2. So
Mm.
on the UA side, and also like the Soccer Manager 24, it's kind of like it's different studio than EA, right? So they know EA doesn't do any like very big UA, so they just said, "Oh well, okay, well we can kind of get these players on our app," and there you go, number 1 in Brazil, Mexico, Italy, Germany, Spain, UK. Pfft, great.
Do we know if the Spanish coach is is doing the football manager thing yet? The fired coach?
He should.
We have an opening there.
Oh no. I mean, the team, obviously, the women's team did fantastic, but
Right.
great
No, I know
players.
there's controversy about the coach after I guess he got fired, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Just connecting the dots between live events, right, and how many, what happens to associated games, and it makes a ton of sense that you would see bumps that even if they're not necessarily marketed, right, just because people are simply interested in it, they will go look up games and go play them if they have a chance, whether they're free to play or whether they have to pay for it. But yeah, I agree that. People will probably still continue to call EA Sports' version of that FIFA, and that's not necessarily. I mean, just because they're the biggest game in town, it's probably going to be a tough hill for anybody else to climb to kind of match that, or maybe eventually over time they'll resolve that deal and they'll get back in bed together. Who knows? But yeah, I agree that I don't expect FIFA to really crash and burn in the next 2 years because of that.
All right, guys. Well, one trend I have is something I've been talking about a few years, but I think Mark Zuckerberg, when he talked about at Meta, one of his shareholder newsletters, he called this year the year of efficiency. And I do think that what we've been seeing in the industry in terms of the end of ZIRP, zero interest rate policy environment, means M&A fueled growth, focus on revenue growth, and rather than like the real fundamentals of the business. I think that's going to change a lot. And so I do think that we've seen a bit of rationalization in terms of layoffs and things like that. Not to be a bummer trend, but I do think because because I think once we focus on the fundamentals now and get leaner and stronger, I think that's gonna be the tee up for a stronger future. But I do expect to see like new kinds of management teams and leaders succeed versus the previous environment. And I do think there are some current and upcoming layoffs that are going to be a little bit surprising for folks. But yeah, I would say the trend that I want to just bring up, which some people in our audience are probably already seeing and feeling, is the age of efficiency now. Less M&A fueled growth, less revenue, more on fundamentals, more on really like trying to operate businesses more profitably. Any thoughts on that?
We're always talking about how many companies are laying off people, but we should take a step back and see and look at how many people actually they hired before COVID or during COVID. It's just
Right.
like that should be a comparison between these. Obviously, nobody likes to be laid off, and I've seen it and experienced it multiple times. And most probably, if I wasn't a consultant, I would experience it also in the future. But that's kind of like hard life.
Yeah, man, I disagree. 2023 has been rough on a number of fronts. Like, I think you had this huge surge in 2020, even 2021, maybe the first half of 2022, and then things really slowed down, whether it was perception of recession or recession plus inflation, plus the denouement of the COVID-19 pandemic all came together to simply drive down, hours of use, spending, people going back to, physical workplaces, simply not playing as much. And I think that, probably a fair amount of companies had hoped that those trends, the landing would be soft, or the trends wouldn't come down back to the baseline almost. But I think the reality is that in many cases, we're kind of back to a somewhat higher baseline than pre-COVID, but further down than I think a lot of expectations kind of would have thought a year or two ago. And so, I get what you're saying about efficiency. I think that's probably what you just described, Joe, is basically the same thing that you could say in most downturns. Like, what do you do?
Right.
You've got to circle the wagons. You've got to get back to basics. You've got to execute and deliver on, listen very closely to your customers and deliver on an experience that they find really compelling. And so I agree with you. I know we should be disagreeing on such things, but I agree with you that in these circumstances, it's
Yeah.
just has to be done. It's just a function
Yeah.
of surviving. I mean, look at Unity, or look at Epic Games, or wherever you want to take, just pretty deep cuts recently. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are some significant layoffs coming from, God knows what happened. Is Bracer still around? You can take your pick of companies that have had very rough years, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. I don't think we're quite at the bottom yet.
And hopefully in survival, and once we get leaner, then survive then thrive. So definitely kind of a tough time, but I do think this is going to be a setup for. Unfortunately, we're in a great industry for growth and innovation. So
Is there a world where we see, more in this climate? Like, I don't know how much of this is global or US focused, right? Like, I know there's global elements, but a lot of what at least I've seen is, heavy emphasis on some US teams. I wonder, is there a world that we start to see more titles succeed out of China that are going global in markets like the US? Where, like, we basically, the thing that I'm looking at a lot, and it's not necessarily gaming, but we see for the first time in a meaningful way, Temu, and Shein, which are headquartered in China and e-commerce shopping sites, have broken into the US retail market in a way that they're the number one apps above domestic players.
right.
And that's a big shift for at least, I think, the American shopper. There's questions around staying power and things like that, but weekly active users of Temu was bigger than Walmart in the US recently. So that's pretty huge. Obviously, there's foot traffic in stores, but I just wonder if there's any sort of efficiencies, or if the way the models work, or how the teams are run, or from a cost perspective, if that gives an advantage, or if there's something that we could see happen there. I know it's a big emphasis of a lot of studios in China, like the going global model, especially with what you can produce domestically under certain licensing rules. But curious what you think, because that's something we've seen
No,
in
I agree
mobile
with you,
commerce.
Lexi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what's
Yeah.
been happening is that there are a limited number of game licenses in China. And so a lot of the Chinese game development studios understand that part of their strategy now is they must go global. Even the Japanese have been talking about going global for a long time, just because they have limited
Well,
growth in their domestic markets. And
Yeah.
then to your other point, because of cost structure, because of like the West has, in this age of excess previously, like it's been very difficult to be able to cost effectively produce titles out of the West when you have salaries that are pretty dramatically higher. And so like when you have companies like MiHoYo spending 200 million a year in ongoing game development out of China, working 996, relative to like a Ubisoft who's going on a 4-day work week, and who's like, what I'm saying. It's like, so that trend has been there, and I agree that's not a trend we talked about, but that's kind of like a couple of trends that are there from what you're mentioning.
and the games coming out of China, like 3 of those games that I mentioned are from China, actually. Kingdom Guard, Top War, Whiteout Survival as well. And,
Yeah.
and there are also other game companies from South Korea, Japan, that are expanding to Western market as well, and doing quite well. So it's definitely there.
Right.
And we've seen on the ad side, like TikTok kind of creeping up that list of ad network providers, right? Moving out of the top, moving from outside the top 10 in gaming into the top 5 in some cases for ad networks. So to your point, Lexi, that it's beyond just games, that the rise of some Chinese, giants in North America and Europe seems to be a trend that's probably going to keep continuing. Yeah.
All right, maybe one more trend.
How come nobody said hybrid casual? It's definitely a trend everybody's talking about.
Didn't we start with that with your idea? It's a hybrid casual game that turns hardcore.
It's kind of it's slightly different. It's slightly different, but yeah, like similar but different. Because on the hybrid casual side, it's more like these hyper casual studios, like kind of like adding layers on the IIP side and the like deeper monetization with using kind of hyper casual style or visual style. So yes, the CPIs and the LTV on like the kind of the framework is similar than the fake gameplay as an onboarding. But this is slightly different because it's actually not fake. it's like building few different games in one game. So yeah, it's definitely doing quite well. Some of the studios, 10 million revenues a month out of nowhere on the hybrid casual side, like Dreamdale, Mob Control, My Perfect Hotel now just exploding in the US and like worldwide. It's just it's crazy.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
The hybrid casual. It's one of those funny ones where it's kind of like, how do you define a hybrid casual game? Like, I think that's where, I was about to ask you before you obviously gave us the list, but like what games in your mind would be hybrid casual? And that's a really interesting one because September was a big month for My Perfect Hotel. We did see, it was like number 5 globally by downloads. Huge. It was number 1 in like 39 markets. It was massive.
They scaled like crazy. Like there is no tomorrow. Seriously, it was everywhere. And Applovin was their like biggest partner on the UA side to like power this growth and fuel it.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. I did my homework on all of these before. Pretty much. We could talk about it for hours.
Should we close this section out with one more trend?
Yeah, I can go. I just I was looking at UEFN, right, and Unreal Editor for Fortnite, and it looks like the content creators there could generate about $400 million, or at least it seems to be trending toward that this year. The payouts to the creators on UEFN. And I was thinking about, I put Roblox in that same group of a platform where the game devs are probably on track more to make 600 or 700 million. I had about 680 million this year annualized based on the payout percent of 25% based on their 2Q revenues. And then Minecraft Marketplace, maybe $150 million. There may be some other examples, but we're talking about like $1.2 billion generated by, level creators, map creators, island creators, or whatever you want to call them. And it seems to me that if we rewound that clock a couple years, that would be zero for UEFN. I guess, Minecraft and Roblox have been there for many, many years, but I have a sense that that's trended up quite a bit. And maybe there's another great example out there, but I have this idea that if some of those micro studios that are doing that, we're probably talking more than 100 of them that are making millions, if not tens of $1 million this year based on that content, that could continue. And would they kind of join up with some massive live streamers or YouTube video content creators, and basically a partnership between content creators on the, driving viewership to those places, and then the revenue generated from those experiences? I just get the sense that could be a really interesting, growth driver in a down market, right? But over the next 12 months, do you guys see the same thing, or you think it's possible that this is kind of overblown, and that the idea of content co-creation platforms growing over time, becoming a more important part of the market is probably not going to happen?
I mean, I kind of, sorry to keep agreeing, but like when we look at the history of games, like every major hit has come from like a mod. There's been
Yeah,
some,
that's true.
kind of like there's been some indication of traction, product market fit to scale somewhere, right? And like, I would say Warcraft 3 in particular was a game that really kicked off tower defense, kicked off like MOBAs and a bunch of other games. And so like, and Battle Royale was like a mod. And so like to that point, we do see some companies who actually are using that as a strategy. So like I did a podcast with Pete Hawley from 100 Thieves who mentioned that, they have two teams. They have their UEFN team that's building prototypes and things like that. And when they figure out something that works, then their AAA team goes to work on it. And so I think like this notion of being able to create different kinds of game experiences that are really fun and cool and leveraging the creativity of a huge ecosystem of people who generally would not be able to make games, but using their tools can bring an idea to manifestation in some way. And then finding something that's really cool and then productizing that as a standalone thing, it becomes a lot easier and much faster based upon the trend that you're talking about. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And hopefully we'll have more disagreements and predictions, but I don't know if you guys have have other thoughts.
I mean, I feel like I just want to put a stake in the sand now that I want to do something with Taylor Swift and the Chiefs and like build something here. Can we all come together? I feel like this is the super idea of like, let's get a piece of that pie. Let's build a level of something that's this game.
Well,
I agree with you. I think that, the authenticity is important.
Yeah, the idea of the metaverse, right, which I know a lot of people do not like at this point. But the idea that people at the edge of the network, the creators themselves, that you give them the tools, and it may even be just a concert thing or whatever it is, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a game, but if you're driving huge amounts of use in a 3D real-time environment, it certainly is game-like. And I wonder if there will be, some of them will probably be very derivative of what already is, or doing send-ups of other things, mashups that we don't expect. But I don't know. I think that the creativity by some of those creators will probably, break expectations of what normal dev teams would do. At least that's my sense of where this is probably going.
All right. And in the interest of time, I know probably have a lot of other trends we could talk about, but maybe shifting now to predictions. And so, we've had so much happen in 2023, but looking to the future and thinking about what should executives, game developers, UA managers, whoever in the games industry be thinking about for next year. And I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of safe predictions we can make, but also if you have any crazy predictions, I don't know, maybe starting with you again, Matej, what do you think? What do you have as a prediction for next year?
Well, first of all, I hate predictions, but I have one only thanks to the data that predictions should be based on data that we have. So I kind of think the Applovin will be the biggest UA channel amongst the all of them, surpassing Google for sure. Well, Facebook is not up there anymore, and TikTok is maybe number 3. So number 1 will be definitely Applovin, because I see like such a good performance on so many games, not only the hybrid casual games that I could see, but also IIP only or ads or other revenue based games as well. And it's just mind blowing.
Right.
Just mind blowing.
Maybe for predictions, we should make a rule that you have to disagree with one prediction. And so I'll disagree with you on this one, Matej.
Okay.
So
I have only one because
here's my counter to that.
Okay.
My prediction will be that that Apple will crack down on fingerprinting, which will then nuke Applovin's business.
No problem with that. You will see. You will see. It's not. Okay. It's never gonna. That's it. I told you on the last podcast we did. It's not.
There are workarounds.
There are no way this should happen.
For the sake of disagreement, though, I'll say that I have my own prediction, but
all right.
But anyway, Lewis, what do you got?
I mean, one of the thoughts I had was that Microsoft seems to be looking at how they can get advertising into their mix more generally, right? So obviously in the mobile business, it's a huge part of the revenue pie for a lot of developers and publishers, pretty sophisticated. And I've been waiting to see, honestly, more uptake in, again, something like Xbox, something like PlayStation. Steam probably won't do it though, but you could look at some of the bigger PC or console ecosystems out there, communities out there, and I'm keep looking for evidence that one of them is going to go big into it. So this is out on the limb prediction. I'm not going to take it personally. You could probably say 2026 rather than 2024, but I'm positing that Microsoft will launch some ad revenue subscription-based business model around Game Pass Ultimate, so it would have its cloud stream gaming services, especially in some developing economies where the interest in spending $10 or whatever it is per month or $15 a month on that service is low, but they could do a lower price tier, half that much, maybe even less than $5 a month. But you've got to watch a certain amount of ads in order to access their catalog of games. It leverages their Azure assets. So I'm not seeing that really from Sony. I'm not seeing it from Steam. But Microsoft has been doing some heavy investments in advertising, and they've talked about it. Some of their execs have noodled on this idea as recently as this year. So my out on a limb prediction would be that next year, Microsoft is the first kind of major console ecosystem to support an ad-based subscription tier in at least a few markets where they're pairing their game catalog with, ads, whether they're coming before a game, in between levels, whatever it is. And, trying to augment their game, but keep growing their Game Pass subscription revenue stream and number of subscribers to kind of hit their larger goal, which is to move subscriptions to being, the foundation of their games business rather than an adjunct. Thoughts, comments, hatred comments.
I'm still processing.
Yeah, I'm still processing as well.
But yeah, I could see that. And it does make sense. I mean, I think even Netflix introduced something like that as well, right? Or I'm not sure if that's still
I think
there.
Netflix has chose Microsoft as their ad partner, which seems out of left field to me.
Okay.
But I believe there was a deal signed between them, like a strategic deal where there's
Okay.
they're going to use Microsoft's ad tech to kind of push a lot of things, but probably their games as well. And I'll throw out there that in the leak from the Activision Blizzard deal, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds like they're trying to think about a small device that could be plugged into a TV set. It's more like an appliance, like a set-top box, where you don't even have to have the console, but you'll be able to do cloud stream gaming on a monitor or a TV set, whatever it is, by 2028, which implies to me, if they're going to do an ad-based business model, they're going to want to have that out there for a few years before they launch such a device to make sure
Right.
they're going to, be able to monetize that to a significant extent.
All right. Well, Google Stadia V2.
Well, they didn't have. Did they have many ads? No, they didn't.
Oh no,
really
they
do
didn't
ads.
have ads, but the model in terms of like,
Cloud gaming
oriented
first.
gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, with ads. We'll
Okay.
see.
It's
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think I'm trying to do the like mental calculation here around like if I would tolerate it personally or not. Like I think when you have console, like buying a console is such a like step up. You're committing. It's a huge investment, and then how much of the annoyance of ads would you tolerate? Like I don't know. That's a question. I'm not sure because I guess I've never seen it on console in that way, but I feel. I feel like I'd be inclined not to want to tolerate ads. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to think. Like I'm curious
about it, and they settled on $3 as the cost where the trade off was, where most people would accept ads in exchange for getting that service. But that was just one survey.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
I guess
interesting too because
YouTube.
the type of game, like the type of game as well. Like if you, depending on what you're playing on a console too, maybe. I just feel like the mental math around how much I invested in the console and still kind of like trip me out that I'd have to like suffer through ads potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, it may be cloud only. It could be make more sense in a cloud gaming context, and therefore that's why I was saying through maybe Azure and what they're doing with the Game Pass Ultimate.
Okay. Lexi, you have a prediction?
I do.
Let's
So
make it
I
out there.
think.
Let's make it crazy.
All right. Oh, I should have gone first. Crazy could come later.
Okay.
I'm not going to challenge you on Applovin being the biggest UA channel, but I do have. I won't challenge directly. I wanted to talk about TikTok because I do think, from a UA standpoint, it's a really compelling one. I know you said it's about number 3. I think there's some really interesting things with TikTok being competitive or potentially.
Let me put my
Oh my
TikTok
gosh!
cap on.
Look,
Yeah.
Sponsor. We need a sponsor call out here.
yeah, I know. I feel like you're an influencer, a sponsored influencer now. But I think there's a world where TikTok actually eats a bit of gaming's lunch in some respects on mobile, right? We've seen spend in TikTok has like skyrocketed in the last 2 years, especially among Americans. They're about 40% of all the spend, and which really surprised me. Initially, I didn't think that would be a behavior we'd see take off as it did in the US. And gaming spend decreased for the first time last year, about 5%. This year, we're still forecasting. We think it'll still decline a little bit, about 2% on the whole, and then hopefully rebound in 2024. So bundling in a few predictions, I feel like. But TikTok is one where they're the biggest, they're number one, right? Games have been the number one leaders of mobile for spend for what feels like millennia, but is, like 12 years. And TikTok is actually so far in front. So Q1 to Q3, over $3 billion have been spent on TikTok on the app stores through the kind of like in-app purchases. Number 2 is YouTube. Number 3 was Honor of Kings, and TikTok saw double. And that's the first time we've seen that level of like this massive gap. And so there's a world where I'm wondering, because we are seeing that, non-gaming is growing for spend. And I wonder if there's this, we saw TikTok sort of come in and first disrupted social a bit in some metrics, right? Downloads and engagement and things like that. We see more people are spending more time in TikTok than on YouTube on average. It's almost at 40 hours. I think it's like 33 or 34 hours a month per person. So almost a whole week of work you're giving to TikTok on average. And that passed YouTube, which is huge because YouTube's been that like behemoth for time per user. And then we see it kind of creep into video streaming. We saw it in China where time in popular streaming providers dipped as time grew in TikTok. And I'm wondering if there's this sort of entertainment pool or this entertainment wallet that TikTok's eating into a bit of gaming money. So yes, there's lots of other trends happening in the gaming space, and happy, we can talk through those too of like why spend decreased and disposable income. But you can't deny TikTok's influence. And then there's also that countervailing like, but it's a UA channel that's growing as well. So is it kind of competitive, or is it helping the ecosystem and this kind of natural tension? And I wonder with respect to the trend that you talked about before around these fake ads, fake gameplay. I mean, TikTok's whole thing is a bit more of like authenticity at its core, right? It's how it's making money from live streaming and whatnot. So I wonder if there's this like, if it's a great UA channel, do people tolerate, do they want like an authentic, or like, does it tap into a different psyche when I don't know. So throwing out a lot of angles, I think, with TikTok, but I think the biggest thing is I think there's going to be a massive year in like, does it kind of take away wallet from gaming, or is it more of this new UA channel that ultimately helps the industry?
Oh, it's definitely a new UA channel that helps. It just climbed out of like top 10, top 15, which was very minimal in terms of spend, to top 2, top 3 maybe on some games. It's huge already, and it's definitely growing like hell. So I should disagree, but I don't.
What happens if TikTok loses all the ROAS targeting type of stuff from fingerprinting?
But they're not doing fingerprinting; they're using scan. What are you talking about? So they're good. It's the same thing on Facebook. I'm using value optimized campaigns. I'm using Applovin optimized campaigns, So it's very good.
How can you do that with scan? That shouldn't be possible.
What do you mean? Like, you are kind of this is going to be very deep in terms of the UA discussion. Obviously, you are setting up the conversion schema where you use the revenue schema, where you kind of use a purchase event with the revenue brackets, and then you can actually identify. Not user level.
Limited window.
Window, yeah. You can. It's on day 1 now. Scan
4.0. We'll save this for another podcast.
Yeah. That's why, like, don't even ask.
All right. Okay. Any other thoughts on TikTok?
No.
I mean, it's a really interesting idea if it could cannibalize the time. I mean, we got a 7-year-old, and I know she watches YouTube videos, but TikTok videos show up in her stream, and it's definitely, she can do both at the same time. Quite honestly, she's multitasking, playing Roblox while watching Funny or whoever it is, some streamers out of Canada, Crew. Who she loves, playing Roblox. It's kind of like surreal thing, but she's actually multitasking. So the hours on both, I suppose, are rising at the same time. But yeah, I think, Lexi, it's a really interesting idea that could non-gaming applications, which you've talked about, the downloads and revenues, everything kind of trending away from gaming, which has been so huge for so long. It kind of makes sense it would trend that way. But whether this is a really precise example where it could cannibalize at least some portion of the time and the spending that's going on in gaming proper, just because kids, I think especially, are probably watching a ton of videos on TikTok and elsewhere. So yeah, I have to agree with you. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
have
I'm
any
curious.
thoughts. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious from the UA side, right? Like you talked about it being like a spend channel. What about organic on TikTok? Because that's what I think is kind of compelling as far as like a new.
It is.
And
It is also
yeah, like what?
dumb ways
How?
to die, right? A
Yeah.
case, and then also
Yes.
some
Yeah.
others.
Exactly.
It's thanks to the algo. It kind of is like the go-to channel for organic growth, which can translate into the installs because it's still kind of early, but also because how the algorithm works. So it's definitely a good one for organic installs and growth. And then you can actually translate that into even UA because you can use those best performing posts in terms of millions of views or the highest number of views to actually use it as a UA creative, which again boosts the whole system. So yeah, it's both actually.
Okay. Yeah, I was just about to say I don't use TikTok at all, so I'm not quite
Yeah, don't do
sure.
it. But you can follow 2.5 gamers there.
But
It's
yeah, no,
it's also
I
going
can't
quite well.
disagree that it's a massive powerhouse. So
Yeah.
that on that I can't disagree. And I have one prediction coming from me, which is that I actually believe that AI will be much more fundamentally transformational to our industry in a lot of ways, not only on the game development side, but I also think it's going to become an enabler for a new kind of game genre. So now, a new genre enabled by AI. And so, like an example could be like PVE Dungeons and Dragons, where the AI is the dungeon master, or some kind of a new kind of game we just haven't been able to figure out yet. So I'm not sure if this happens next year in a few years, but I do think that there's going to be a game that's fundamentally enabled by AI that emerges and potentially becomes like a top genre. Well, maybe not like top 5 genre, but like
Yeah,
like
it
a
will
top
get
genre.
there. It will get there.
Yeah.
Well, even I created my own Matej AI, so AI is definitely going there. I can be your mod in the Dungeons and Dragons if you want. Well,
I mean, I
Dungeon
disagree
Master.
only in that I think it's going to take some time for that to happen, Joe. In that, I think it was Adobe Max had Firefly examples. One of their clients was listed as EA, and I asked them what exactly is EA doing with Firefly, which is their Gen AI tool. But that's really like Photoshop type things. But they are looking at not only videos and how you replace the backgrounds and do like art assets and changing advertising to kind of make it localized based on one ad and localize it in every language and et cetera, but the trend is for models, like full on 3D models that you can import into some other game development process, right? And so moving away from flat images and concept art into actual 3D models that you could import and texture and do everything else and start real making game assets out of it that can be used in a finished game. I think that's going to take some time. I think we're probably a couple of years away. I mean,
Oh
this thing
no,
very
that's
fast.
gonna be way. That's
You
gonna
think
be
there'll
very
be like
soon.
a
That's gonna be very
unicorn
soon.
where there's a company that's actually making a
100%.
ton of money from game dev pubs by enabling that very soon?
Yes.
Okay.
Very soon. It's like exponential growth in terms of the AI. You could see that in Midjourney, DALL-E, and what else, Stable Diffusion as well. It's like so many different companies already working on these type of assets.
So
It's
yeah, so in that case, if it comes a lot sooner than that, then it could be a small team that comes up with a crazy idea of an open world where you have Gen AI driven NPCs and whatnot mixed in with an AI generated map, and you could do some things that you don't even know what the gameplay is going to be. Like what was that space adventure where you went to the planet and it wasn't defined until you got there. Um, the one from
Oh yeah,
not
the
so
procedurally generated. Yeah, I know
yeah,
what game you're
the
talking about.
world,
Yeah,
where you go out. But
yeah, that game.
yes, that one that I didn't play. I didn't play.
Yeah, I didn't play either. All right. Any other predictions anyone wants to talk about?
I just
So it
wonder
seems
with
like.
the concept
Oh,
of
go ahead.
AI, like, well, with AI, does that
Hmm?
actually, do you guys think that in any way would level the playing field? Because, like Lewis, you just mentioned, like maybe a relatively small team could gain traction. Or, like, is there a possibility of like these indie developers being able to produce? You talked about the example of like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Like, there's, how many person teams building those? Like, does AI help level the playing field, or does it still maintain that
So
you
I
need to
can
be
I
this
can tell
massive
you how
studio?
my creative team leverages AI. They
Yeah.
usually kind of decrease the amount of hours put into work by like 5x just by using AI tools in the video creation, and it's like that's huge.
Yeah.
So, and it's only a creative team for video production and creating like ads for mobile games. If you put this into the game development, then yes, more like indie studios or small teams, they have definitely an advantage.
Hmm.
Yeah, I do think that it is, because it's almost using cloud compute to do a process that you would need a ton of people to do, right? In other words, it's automating a process which is very difficult to do, and it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be illusions and lots of problems with it, still to be sorted out, and maybe perhaps copyright issues, things like that, right? But it certainly allows prototyping today, I think, much faster. But the actual, creation of game levels and much more sophisticated things, I think it will come. And the smaller teams should be able to benefit because you can create those assets without the same level of expertise, right? It's a rare skill to be a great artist, right? But if you can prototype stuff with AI that gets you most of the way there, it seems to me that would open up the possibilities for smaller teams to come up with really awesome stuff that that wouldn't be possible without Gen AI.
Right. And maybe even tying back to your trend, Lewis, about live services, to the extent that AI can get better and better and allow a content treadmill type of games to be able to dramatically lower their cost of production, that would allow smaller, like, to your point, smaller teams to be able to compete against bigger teams, as well as like the new opportunities in terms of potentially new kinds of games and capabilities that we talked about. So yeah, I definitely think that when I talked to a bunch of gaming CEOs and other folks, but I do think it's something that as executives, it seems like many folks in the industry are just kind of fast following, or just kind of like waiting for someone to do something, then they'll fast follow. And I do know a few folks who are kind of diving in and really trying to learn this stuff. Well, sounds like Mate, you're kind of diving in, but I do
Yep.
think more people should get closer and start working hands on with AI if you want to get additional alpha and advantage in the industry moving into 2024.
Ooh.
I have one
So,
question for you, Mate, about Gen AI and ads, right? In other words, it seems to me that machine learning and Gen AI could be applied to these big data sets about users, and you could get to, I don't know, personalization. You could reach some insights about how to target people, gamers, better with Gen AI if you brought those two things together. And I'm wondering if you've
That's
also
useless.
seen.
That's useless because you kind of use the algorithms from Facebook, Google, TikTok, Applovin, and you can't like, well, you still can kind of target very niche audiences and maybe target better, but you use kind of like events like purchase, different maybe onboarding funnel events to target these people rather than just handpicking them with AI.
Okay, so you
right.
don't think that's like something we're going to see pop out in the next couple of years as Gen AI plus advertising targeting and whatnot?
No, I don't see that. Which may happen, but I don't see that happening at all.
All right.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, any other predictions before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
good.
sounds like the only thing we really disagreed upon is this view on Applovin becoming the biggest
Yes.
UA channel. But it's actually more of a fundamental issue on whether or not in a post fingerprinting world, whether you are able to do attribution against spend well or not. So maybe we can tee that up for a future podcast, Mate. We should
Yes.
definitely dive into that. This is a very critical issue that has a lot of implications. So maybe we can dig into that deeper. But for our audience, 2023, a lot of trends happening. I'm so happy to be in the games industry that is so innovative, and we got all this stuff happening. You've heard our predictions. Tell us what you think. But until next time, I guess we'll catch you later. Thank you very much to our esteemed guests today, and thank you so much for your insights. We'll catch you all later. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.